So, welcome back to week 2 of our Made to Belong Life Group study. I hope you guys have enjoyed the first week and have gotten connected in your group a little bit. Today, we get to continue on in the study. Part of what we used to help build this study was a book we read called Made to Belong by an author named David Kim. In the book, he talks about 5 practices for cultivating community in a disconnected world. In this, let me read to you the little blurb from the book. He says, "We are all tired of shallow relationships and communities, longing for something deeper. So how do we practically cultivate meaningful Christ-centered friendships? What are 5 practices to build authentic community in this lonely culture?" And so we took his 5 practices, and that's really what we're going to be focusing on these next 5 weeks. And it's a way for us to get a little more practical. You hear the sermons on Sunday morning, which are kind of give us the biblical basis for what we're talking about. But in life groups, we're going to get really practical. How do we put this into practice in our everyday life? The first characteristic, the first thing that we want to talk about, the first practice is simply priority. Let's be intentional about making a decision to cultivate this type of community. And that's really what we're talking about for this week. In my message on Sunday, I made this claim. If we don't intentionally prioritize relationships, we will accidentally neglect them. And so today I've got Jennifer with me, and we're going to go back and forth a little bit. So say hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
And we're going to talk about this, about prioritizing relationships. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is that in the structure of our modern society, everything is designed for disconnection. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, think about this. You can stay at home. You can order your groceries online. You can have them delivered, which is kind of a cool thing, right? Let's be honest. Even on Amazon, we ordered something on Amazon yesterday, and it was delivered this same day. It's kind of crazy, isn't it?
It was crazy, yeah.
And that's because they have the new Amazon Center down in Mount Airy. But it's really cool. But not only that, you think about our world today. You look at, you can watch an entire TV series just back to back to back from your couch. You can scroll through social media and go anywhere in the world. I had a phone call this morning with a friend in Israel. I mean, I'm just like, that's crazy to have that kind of connection and yet do all of it from your living room couch. So let's talk for a minute about why we are so disconnected and why we're so isolated. So, Jeannie, why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts about this isolation we experience in our world today?
Yeah, so Mike and I were just talking back and forth about this earlier in the week, and it just, as I was folding laundry and doing some things at home, I like to think, and that's what I was thinking about, is we are just kind of set up as a society to be disconnected, and I think that's changed in the last several years, probably last 20, 25 years. I know used to, if I had a question, I would call my mom or call my grandma, or if I was cooking something, I didn't know how to do it, you would ask someone. Now you can Google it, so you don't need other people. And I think we've kind of bought into that lie that we don't need each other in real personal ways. We have experts, I'll say experts, because on Reels and on Instagram and things like that, like we have all these people that are speaking into our life that we don't know and they don't know us. And we seek that out, as some kind of like expert speaking into our life instead of asking people who know us and getting good godly counsel and guidance from people that should be speaking into our lives, people that we know, people that live in our community, people that know our kids, know our husbands. And then also, I think we use social media to take our joys and our failures and our past things that we throw them out there and we post that for everybody to see. So the girl that sat beside you in biology class in 10th grade is commenting on your life. And is that really somebody that you want speaking into your life, or your 4th cousin that lives across the country? Instead of us taking those things to people that we can get affirmation and confirmation and godly guidance from. So I just think we've been kind of fed that lie that we don't need each other, and we've kind of done a fake substitute for community through social media and through platforms that maybe we rely on other than each other.
I think technology has promised us this idea of convenience, like it's going to fix all of our problems. But in reality, it's given us this fake community, which is isolation. And we may be connected to all these people online, and yet we feel so alone and disconnected. And we've seen it, especially, as parenting 20-somethings now, going through COVID and you working with youth ministry all these years, you see that for many teens and young adults, they can more easily text than have a phone conversation. They dread phone conversations. They dread talking in person. And I think that's a result of the technology. It's promised us connection, but in reality, it's created some boundaries for us.
Right.
So I think when we think about that, we have to understand that to overcome this, we've got to make it a priority to develop real relationships. Get over our fears of talking one-on-one, and even as adults, let's be honest, sometimes we would rather stay home than go out, right?
Yep.
That's just the reality of it. On Sunday mornings through this whole series, we're going to be using Romans 12 as kind of a blueprint for developing relationships. And in your group today, you'll be reading through that. It's interesting that about 15 years ago here at Cornerstone, we did a church-wide series on Romans 12. Can you believe it's been 15 years?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's that long ago. But yeah.
It's called R12, True Spirituality. It was by a pastor and author named Chip Ingram. And it was really a good study. But he broke down Romans 12 as kind of a blueprint for discipleship, and he broke it up into living out your faith as a relational disciple. And he talked about your relationship with God, your relationship with the world's values, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with other believers, your relationship with non-believers. And so basically it kind of comes down to you were designed to be a relational person by a relational God. And so we don't get there by accident. And so it takes some intention. And in the book Made to Belong, he used the story of this type of intentionality. He used a story from Luke chapter 8 about the woman who was suffering from disease and kind of reached out to Jesus. She was suffering for many years. And it's interesting. We saw a picture of this scene in a little church in the city of Magdala on the Sea of Galilee, where Mary Magdalene was from, and a powerful picture there.
Weren't you supposed to buy me one of those for Christmas?
I think I was supposed to, but I have not yet. But it's in my shopping cart.
Okay.
It's really cool, though. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that story from Luke chapter 8, because I know you've taught about it before, you're familiar with it. What stands out to you in that story?
Sure. Yeah, and that picture, I think that's why it's so meaningful, because I think that's always been one of my favorite stories from the New Testament, and it's just it's powerful, and so much is packed into those verses. So this lady that went seeking Jesus out, she wasn't just suffering from a physical illness. It was very much a spiritual and mental battle that she was facing too. She was lonely. She was probably weak and tired. Can you imagine fighting something for 12 years? She had been bleeding for 12 years and could not find any resources around her that would help her with this problem. And she had kind of exhausted it all. And if you've ever gone through something where you're struggling physically and you've, gone to doctor after doctor after doctor, I mean, this is where she was. And I think that the way that Jesus responded shows us his intentionality, and I think also the way that she sought Jesus out shows her intentionality. And I think both of those are important, because she was lonely. She was considered unclean by Jewish law, so that means she couldn't go to church. She couldn't be around people. She couldn't go to family gatherings. She was pretty much by herself, and she was isolated from community, and she was carrying worry. She was carrying shame, hopelessness, and she was desperate. And I think that just shows how much that took a toll on her, is not being able to be connected to her community. And that motivated her to do something radical. And she didn't just kind of stumble upon Jesus. It wasn't accidental. It was something that she had planned. She had calculated out how she was going to do this, and she knew when she saw Jesus pass by, she was going for it. And I think that's what's so cool about that picture. And I don't know, maybe we can show that to the life groups in some way. You can see her finger reaching out, and it's very intentional. It's very firm. It's like and then you can see this little kind of glow around it where the power goes out from Jesus. So, I think that to me is what is such a powerful thing about her, is there was risk there. She was going into a crowd of people when she wasn't supposed to be there. She was a woman in a crowd of men. She was a woman going into a situation where she thought Jesus might look at her and say, "Get away from me, you're unclean." But she took the risk. And I think that as he stopped and he paid attention to her, he showed that he was also intentional about that. Because if you go back a chapter or a few verses in that chapter, you'll see that he was on his way to heal a boy who was on his deathbed. And that's not something light. It wasn't like Jesus was going to lunch with his brothers. He was actually going to heal someone. So he was on this path of something that was extremely important. I mean, what could be more important than saving a child that was on his deathbed? But he stopped and he noticed her and he paid attention. And in that chapter, the book Made to Belong, there was a quote that I liked, and it was actually a quote that he shared from someone else. But what he said was, "We are all born into the world looking for someone looking for us." And that's exactly where I think she was. She was looking for someone that would look at her. And Jesus showed us that relationships matter and that they're not accidental, that they're intentional.
I think that's such a powerful story, and it's a little bit convicting, because not only was she seeking out Jesus, this was, when he healed her, it was an invitation back into community. Like, he didn't just heal her physical ailment, he healed her relationships. Right. And for us, so many times we let fear keep us from really seeking out after Jesus and really seeking out after other people. And one of our goals in this is to help us understand why it is so important. In Romans 12, it says, that our bodies are a living sacrifice, that we lay down everything to seek after Jesus. And that's really the foundation for this priority or this intentionality that we're talking about. And if that woman could break all those fears and seek out after Jesus, why can't we do the same? And so before we can move from isolation into community, though, it starts with this priority, but we've got to understand why. And in closing this session, I wanted to share a concept that I'd read about years ago by Dallas Willard. And we've mentioned him a few times during this series. He's kind of a theologian, a professor of philosophy for many years. He passed away several years ago. But he talked a lot about discipleship, wrote a lot about discipleship. And he talked about how we change. He kind of had his own philosophy of change and a process. And just as we were going through this priority and intention, it made me really think about it a little bit. And he called it the VIM model, VIM. And let me kind of explain. I'll read a little bit. He says we often reduced faith to trying harder or knowing more, which leads to burnout, guilt, and kind of a shallow spirituality. He taught that transformation does not happen by accident or just willpower. It's not just like, I want to try harder, but transformation happens through a thoughtful, grace-filled process that helps people actually become the kind of person that Jesus calls them to be. He talked about this VIM transformation. V stands for vision. We need a vision for seeing a better way to live, and believing that it is true and it is better, that it's scripture, that it helps us to be more Christ-like. And hopefully what we're doing through this series is creating that vision for a relational life that is better than the alternative, the isolated life. Then he talks about intention. That's what I stands for. That means that you get to the point of saying, not only do I understand what it looks like, I'm going to be intentional about getting there. And that's a huge step. And I think so many times we have a vision, but we don't really have the intention to get there. And that means we're going to pursue it. And you'll talk about that in your group today. How do we do that? And then the M stands for the means. That's when we really get serious. Not only do we have the vision, not only do we have the intention to get there, but now we start working out the means or the process or the steps that we need to get from where we are to where Christ wants us to be. This is habits. These are spiritual practices. This is making that decision day after day to get out of our comfort zones and actually seek out community. And this is not forced. It's not fake. It's the real, just day-to-day choice I'm going to make relationships a priority. So any final thoughts before we turn it back over to our group leaders today?
No, I do think that when you look at that Vim, that really is what the woman that was healed by Jesus was doing. She had a vision and she had intention, and then she had the means to do it. So I think you can't have one of the three. Like, you really have to go after that. And I think that that's what made the difference. And I think Jesus modeled for us that he wasn't too busy to notice her, which I think is also a big thing, that we need to notice each other and then be intentional about it.
So in your groups, we're going to discuss all these things. So thanks for listening in. Let's get really intentional about being Christ-like in our relationships with each other, seeking after God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving others as Christ has called us to do. So jump in and let's have a great discussion today.